Can everyone hear me back there? Yes? Awesome. Thank you, and an apology for the slight delay. The wonders of the internet age seem to be that anytime there's a lot of people using the internet doesn't work. So welcome to my presentation. Thank you for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about a concept that we're calling playful learning, that we've been working at Microsoft Studios over the last couple of years, and that basically acknowledges a big trend that is happening today in education and in games. First, a little bit about me. I have a background in computer engineering. I've worked in a variety of industries, the game industry. I've done development in robotics, artificial intelligence, engineering in many different fields. I'm also a learning scientist. I have a doctorate in learning sciences, cognition, and instruction, where I've been focusing on complex technologies, in particular video games, as a way to empower people to learn. And one of the main things that I want to talk about today is a concept that we're calling playful learning. I'll just skip this agenda for a moment to just get down to the meat of it. A few months back, I read an article in The Economist where they were talking about something called the third industrial revolution of work. For those of you who are familiar with the concept of the Industrial Revolution as we learned it in school, it was the transition from very ad hoc, trading mechanisms and handmade products into the ability to start producing things that could be repeatable and reproducible. The second industrial revolution, or what they call the second industrial revolution, was when Henry Ford comes up with a production line and comes up with the automobile. Now, one interesting thing that happened is that Henry Ford used to say, well, now everybody can have any car they want as long as it's black. The second industrial revolution led us to this world where we could reproduce things and mass produce them and make them at very low cost at the cost of customization. However, today, with technologies like nanotechnology, 3D printing, and the massive power of computation, we're moving to a world that the economist calls the third industrial revolution, which is the era of mass customization. Anybody can begin a startup, anybody can begin to fund it, anybody can begin to work. And what does that have to do with learning? Well, it has massive implications. Because when we're moving to a world where, rather than thinking about these large conglomerates, Microsoft included, we are moving into an interconnected world where the startup and the notion of a startup is having far more power than ever before. We need people who are trained in the kinds of skills that will empower them in that era. And so, of course, one would hope that the educational landscape and the educational institutions would adapt to the needs of that market. One of the things that we've noticed, in case you haven't noticed, is, well, a school system is failing. And the reason why the school system is failing at producing the right kinds of people and the right kinds of employees is because their structures have not adapted. We still work in a system where the teacher stands in front of the classroom, just like I'm standing in front of you, and hopes that at the end of the lecture, like the lecture that I'm giving to you, you'll actually remember 1% of what I've just said. Chances are that by the point that I finish saying this, you'll remember less than 1%. It doesn't really matter, because the system of just conveying information verbally like this does not work. We know that. It works for very, very few people. And the way of following a textbook linearly and following through a set of content linearly also doesn't work for a lot of people. So why hasn't that system changed? Well, there are a variety of structural and political reasons that I don't necessarily want to, oops, sorry about that, that I won't get into in detail. But what I do want to say is that even though okay, Mike is not cooperating with me today. My apologies for that. What I do want to say is that even though the formal education landscape has been super reluctant to change, the informal education aspect, the spaces of learning that happen outside of the classroom have actually introduced some dramatic innovations that will, for good or for evil, transform education forever. Among them, things like the semantic cloud, the ability to aggregate content in sites like Wikipedia, How Stuff Works, you name it. The ability to bring massive amounts of knowledge together into one site and solving the problem of distribution. Second, things like peer-to-peer discussion, where a teacher can now go and turn on a Skype connection and for free begin to talk or to lecture or to have discussions with people across the world very, very quickly. Things like scalable distribution models, where you have things like mobile, ebooks, and models like the inverted classroom, Udacity and Udemy, where you can actually now have 100,000 students taking an artificial intelligence class for free out of Stanford. And finally, and in my mind critically, the crowdsourcing model. Things like Kickstarter, where now somebody can go and create a new educational model and have it be funded by donations of $5 a pop. You know, this is not only affecting education, it's also affecting the game industry. Most of you know, how many of you are familiar with Double Fine Adventure, the Double Fine Adventure project by Tim Schafer? How many $1 million did they get out of, you know, one-spot donations? 3, 4? Yeah, somewhere in that vicinity, $3 million to produce an adventure game. A genre that many people said, well, it's dead. There's no way you're going to produce a $3 million adventure game. And they're producing it, right? Because people want it. And so when these models come in, what they're doing is they're really fracturing the traditional model of doing business in education. What are we doing at Microsoft? Well, at Microsoft, we recognize that. And we recognize that that change is coming. And we're embracing it and doing something that we hope is interesting to empower it. And we call this initiative, now this model, this world that is coming has some important challenges that are coming ahead. One, at the moment, the one thing that we lack the most are user-centered and accessible educational experiences. The truth is that by and large, textbooks are still being produced by academics in academic institutions that speak the language of academics and are not designed for people that do not have that background. And it's astounding that we're creating textbooks for grade schoolers with language that, you know, that some PhDs cannot even handle. Second, you know, the organization of communities, you know, being able to take communities and organize them according to these models and rethink what we're doing with the notion of being a teacher. What does it mean to be a teacher in a world where we empower learners to learn? Standards and assessment, that's a huge one, right? Fill in the bubble tests, multiple choice tests are the coin of the realm in education to this day. Accountability, you know, you're going to hear that all over the place in education. However, those we know fail to measure some of the most fundamental skills necessary for the 21st century. Things like problem solving, critical thinking, thinking in terms of systems, all these things, the fill in the bubble test just fails miserably to measure. And they're expensive to measure. However, new technologies, as I'll show you today, allow us to make that happen. And finally, institutional changes. And that includes, what are we going to do with spaces? What are we going to do with schools? If any of you have followed what is happening in the Detroit public schools, that's the canary in the coal mine to what's going to happen to every public school district in the nation. Last year, they shut down 92 public schools to consolidate. This year, they're going to shut another 132. Why? Because the model of schooling that used to exist, this mass schooling, was designed for an industrial age, an industrial era that was represented by the automotive industry, and that has changed together with the automotive industry to become a lot less of the economic base of our country and of developed countries. So in a nutshell, in my mind, is we have to do better than the textbook for learners. We have to do better than the textbook, and better than just putting textbooks on tablets. There has to be a different way to present information and to present ways to engage learners and empower learners to learn. So what does it mean, and how are we approaching it? Well, today, we're approaching it in multiple ways, but today I want to talk about 2 ways. We're running this program that we call Playful Learning, which essentially says, why don't we start with learning where the vast majority of learning happens? The learning life of a person throughout a whole lifetime, even if they get all the way to a doctorate, just a tiny fragment will be spent in an educational institution. The vast majority of the learning life of a person will happen outside, in the living room, in the places where we play, in the places where we socialize. In all these places, this is where learning happens. Because the difference between learning and education is that learning is something you do, education is done to you. We don't legislate learning. We legislate the hell out of education, right? So how do we start to empower that? Well, what we realized is, look, we live in a world that is mediated. There's a massive amount of media that people are consuming on a day-to-day basis, and they're learning a lot out of that media. If you don't believe that, just go see what's happening in our political discourse and see how many people repeat talking points from Fox News or from the extreme left just because they heard them. They haven't even thought about them. They haven't even assimilated. They don't even understand what they're saying, but they'll repeat them like parrots. Why? Because we're really good at that. As human beings, we're incredibly good at mimicking and repeating, but it takes time before we actually assimilate what we're doing. And so if there's this media out there, if we have television still dominating the landscape of things like advertising, can we create experiences that take that TV content and transform them into a powerful learning platform? And the second one that I'm going to talk about is video games. Today, over 90% of children in the United States consume a video game, and they are game players in a bazillion platforms. Xbox is one of the platforms, PlayStation, tablets, phones, you name it. They are consuming video games. So it's a pervasive form of media. And if it's a pervasive form of media, then it's also a pervasive source of learning for kids. So what is this playful learning approach? Well, the first approach that we had was, can we challenge ourselves to create television content that brings the power, that enhances the power of learning, and yet allows anybody to access it. And the way that we started it was, we said, can an interactive game format turn a traditional TV natural science documentary or an educational show into an engaging, playful learning experience? The answer, and what I'm going to show you right now, is a video of 2 titles that we announced last October that we are about to release this fall. Let's load it here.
Looking for a job is hard work.
This thing.
And with a child to support, it's tough to make ends meet. I use it to...
Somebody asked me a second ago, when did YouTube start getting advertisements? They started monetizing. So this is our announcement at E3.
Hey you guys, it's Maria, and we are here at E3, and we are checking out Microsoft and Xbox. Some really neat things coming out of Microsoft, and I like the philosophy that you guys have now when it comes to family and gaming. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Letty?
Yeah, so with the Kinect for Xbox 360, we have entertainment and games experiences for everyone in the household. So whether your kids want to play games or you want to watch a movie together as a family, if you want to watch sports, you want to get fit, there's something for everyone in the house to enjoy.
That is so cool. Can you show me some of those features?
Absolutely. I'd love to show you Kinect Sesame Street TV and Kinect Nat Geo TV today. Okay, so now I'm showing you Elmo's World, which is, my kids' favorite part of it. So you can actually see us on the screen, and when I move, I can interact with what's there. I can spin, I can get things to move. You can dance, and as I dance, you can see little colors movement. See, anyone who's in the room can do it, and you're actually a part of Elmo's World. And he'll take you through the regular segment. You know how he has characters. He might have Mr. Noodles. He might take you somewhere. Today, he's taking you to the beach. So as your children go to explore the beach, you can go and learn to surf. It's quite fun.
And so what is this, Letty?
So now this is Kinect Nat Geo TV. It's the Nat Geo Wild TV show. It's with Casey Anderson, and you can actually get in and be a part of the show. So you can sit back and learn about animals, become a naturalist, and you can actually become the animal and learn to inhabit the world like they do. Okay, so now we're going to become bears, so you'll have to help me out here. Okay. You'll see this room is actually becoming a part of here. So you see it starts with your room, and now the trees and the water come out, and now we're bears, and we're going to, this episode's about how they're learning, how bears eat. Okay, now as the fish jump out, you have to get it to get your points. So you have to go open your mouth and eat the fish. The more fish you eat, the more points you get. So you can compete with each other.
Oh, I got one.
Nice. And see, you can play with your partner. See, I got that one from you.
Try to catch the pink fish. Move faster.
They are fast.
The idea is to use the power of Kinect.
That's fun. And what I like about it, it gets you moving.
To remove those
That's
boundaries
right. So even if you're just watching
of
TV
the
show with
controller,
family, you're
right?
still
To let
up, you're
anybody
moving
that
off
can
the
stand
couch,
up
which is
and
nice.
move
That's
participate
really cool.
in a learning experience
Okay, so that was really
with
fun. We got to play a
content
bear.
that
Are
we
there
know
other animals that
has
we
a
can play?
tremendous
Yes, so in
history
each
of
episode, you'll learn
educational
about different
validity.
animals.
The
You might
National
be a bear in
Geographic
one episode, or a wolf, an
documentaries
owl,
have a
or a ram.
massive
It really
amount,
teaches you
a
to
plethora
learn and
of wealth
respect
of
and know more
knowledge,
about
of
animals in
content,
the wild.
high quality content,
Now, when is this
talking
available
about
to you?
wildlife,
So
talking
Kinect
about
Nat Geo
ecosystems,
TV,
talking
Kinect
about
Sesame
geography,
Street
talking
TV
about
will both be
peoples.
available this
Imagine now
September,
being able
and
to
you'll
jump
get
into
8
that show
episodes
and
together,
participate with it.
and there'll be
Now,
other seasons
Sesame
coming in the
Street
future
is
as
another
well.
great example of this.
Awesome.
Sesame
Thank you
Street
so
is a
much,
show
and
that
you for
has
watching, you guys.
far
Check out
more
the whole
evidence
Xbox
of
Kinect
educational
experience. And, make sure you
goodness
comment, let
than
us know
almost
how
any
you
form of
think
media
about it, what you
available.
think about
40
it,
years
okay?
of
We'll
research
see you
with
next time.
Sesame have shown that children who watch Sesame Street develop the pre-literacy skills necessary to actually participate in school and succeed in life. And so the philosophy behind two-way television is precisely to say, can we take content that is out there, and rather than keep reinventing the wheel and reinventing the wheel, make that content a powerful and immersive learning experience. As with the National Geographic show that you saw, I can now turn you into a bear. And rather than just tell you and just speak to you about how a bear learns how to develop its survival skills, you can actually be the bear, and you can actually participate in that activity. What we know out of the research that we've done is that that notion, which academics call embodied cognition, is incredibly powerful at cementing the understanding of the subject matter in your mind. And that stuff you will remember. Now, the second approach that I wanted to talk about is an approach that is very popular right now in the game industry, which is user-generated content. But rather than thinking about user-generated content, let's think about players or your consumers as participants in your experience. Rather than saying, I am going to design something for you, I'm going to say, I'm going to design something with you, and I'm going to invite you into the process of creation. Something that we've been doing is we've been working on a project that's called Kodu Game Lab. Kodu Game Lab is a freely accessible software that you can find right now on kodugamelab.com, K-O-D-U. And essentially what it is a tool, a 3D tool that enables children to design their own games. Now, some of the stories that we've seen out of Kodu Game Lab have been incredibly powerful. Last year, or at the beginning of this year, the White House organized its second National Science Fair. And among the winners of the science fair competition was an 11-year-old from Massachusetts who designed a game in Kodu to show people the impact that factories have on air quality in different towns. This is an 11-year-old coming and picking a problem that was very local, because her town in Massachusetts is one of the most polluted towns in the nation, and showing not only how you can playfully convey the idea that these factories are affecting your environment, but also proposing solutions. President Obama was blown away by this. But one of the things that I want to show you, and the most powerful aspect of empowering learners to create their own games, is that the moment that you get somebody to develop ownership of your product, to feel like they have a stake in your product, you have a customer for life. But more importantly, for me, you have a learner for life. And let me show you a little snippet of a child engaged in an after-school program that an after-school program that is participating in using Kodu Game Lab. And here you'll see a little bit of what Kodu can do. Skip over to this.
I'm not finished with. I know.
Let's see here.
About that.
Did you want to show us a little bit of your fraction game or something that you've made so far?
Sure, I'm not completely finished. So far what I'm doing is I'm just pasting these, and then I'm just cloning them.
So Kodu is a tool
Just
that
to get
allows you
20
to use the
apples.
Xbox controller to very quickly add components to a 3D world. You can edit the world, you can terraform it,
Yeah,
you can
I'll just
shape your
show you
level,
what-
give it
what it
form,
will
give it
basically look
textures,
like.
add creatures,
So
and
you're
then begin to add
controlling
controllers.
This guy, and you obviously not the fastest. Hey, just so yeah, he says, "Hey you, yeah you." This is one of those games when you can't see or hear the character you're playing as speak. I just work on the other guys. Stop interrupting. Just how you're feeling. Hungry? For how many apples out of 20? 1/2. Is that it? Yes. Well, good. Just eat that much then. Ah, I got glitch. Come on. Ah.
Gotta get away from him.
I gotta fix this. I gotta fix this one. Come on, come on, come on. I gotta fix this guy's programming first, obviously. Okay, just to save us the time, we're just gonna put once. Now I'll try this out. There.
There we go. Excellent.
So what we're seeing here is something that educational experts call a cycle of expertise. And that cycle of expertise is the fundamental skill that we need to empower people to acquire if they're going to become learners in the 21st century. And that is to develop ownership and to develop the motivation to keep going at anything that they do. But rather, with games, we've mastered the ability to get somebody to persist for 200 hours in a Gears of War campaign or in a Halo campaign. Can I get them to persist into creating something new, into producing something that will let them learn the types of skills that they will develop in the 21st century? With Kodu, we're seeing that they're developing skills in programming, in design, in systems thinking, you name it. This approach has, the power of this approach cannot be underestimated. And in my mind, this is our path into the 21st century. Thank you so much. So we have
Thank you, Alex.
maybe a minute or
yeah, I think we
something
probably have
for
like a minute
questions and
for
answers.
one question. So anyone want to take that minute? Okay, just a second.
KoduGameLab.com.
Yeah, where are they located?
They're here in Redmond, so it's out of Microsoft. Yeah, it's out of Microsoft.
Oh, all right.
It's a project that came out of Microsoft Research. So it started as a research project, and now the Xbox group is the one that's owning it. Yep.
Is there any specific type of content that you find is harder? I'm sorry. Is there a specific type of content that you find is more difficult to integrate into this type of system as far as learning goes?
One of the things that we've learned with interactive technologies is that they are not the end-all be-all and the solution to everything. What they are very powerful at is at getting people to connect things, to understand systems from different perspectives. What they're really not good at is if you want to go, to cover huge amounts of subject matter in a very short span of time, right? Which is what books are really designed for. Go through a whole field of expertise in one single tome. Why? Because the cost to production tends to be really high. However, when we put out technologies where we can crowdsource the production of that knowledge, all of a sudden we are completely disrupting that traditional model of creating those examples. So that's hopefully that kind of answers the question, but there's still a bunch of questions to ask.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.